to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Ellen Preckle. The Broad Highway by Geoffrey Farnall. Chapter 44. The Bow Street Runners. It was toward evening of the next day that the door of my prison was opened and two men entered. The first was a tall, cadaverous-looking individual of a melancholy cast of feature, who, despite the season, was wrapped in a long frieze coat reaching almost to his heels, from the pocket of which projected a short staff or truncheon. He came forward with his hands in his pockets and his bony chin on his breast, looking at me under the brim of a somewhat weather-beaten hat. That is to say, he looked at my feet and my hands and my throat and my chin, but never seemed to get any higher. His companion, on the contrary, bustled forward, and, tapping me familiarly on the shoulder, looked me over with a bright, appraising eye. "S'elp me, Jeremy," said he, addressing his saturnine friend, "s'elp me, if I've ever seen a poor misfortunate cove more to my mind and fancy. Nice and tall and straight-legged, 12 stone if a pound. A 5-foot drop, now, or say 5'6", and he'll go off as sweet as a bird. Och, you'll never feel it, me covey, not a twinge. A little tightish round the windpipe, p'raps, but Lord, it's over soon. You're looking a bit pale round the gills, young cove, but Lord, that's only natural too." Here he produced from the depths of a capacious pocket something that glittered beneath his agile fingers. "And how might be your general health, young cove?" he went on affably. "Bobbish, I hope. Fair and bobbish?" As he spoke, with a sudden dexterous motion, he had snapped something on my wrists so quickly that, at the contact of the cold steel, I started, and, as I did so, something jingled faintly. "There!" he exclaimed, clapping me on the shoulder again, but at the same time casting a sharp glance at my shackled wrists. "There, now we're all 'appy and comfortable. I see as you're a cove as takes things nice and quiet, and so long as you do, I'm your friend. Bob's my name, and bobbish is my nature. Lord, the way I've seen misfortunate coves take on at sight of them bracelets, something outrageous. But you, why, you're a different kidney. You're my kind. You are, what do you say, Jeremy?" "Don't like his eye," growled that individual. "Don't mind Jeremy," winked the other. "It's just his perwerseness. Lord, he is the perwersest codger you ever did see. Why, he finds fault with the Pope of Rome just 'cause he's in the habit of letting coves kiss his toe. I've heard Jeremy work yourself up over the Pope and a pint of porter, till you'd have thought " "And we ain't never a-goin' to start?" inquired Jeremy, staring out the window with his back to us. "And where," said I, "might you be taking me?" "Why, since you ask, my covey, we am taking you to where you'll be took good care on, where you'll feed well and have justice done on you, trust us for that. Though, to be sure, I'm sorry to take you from such proper quarters as these, nice and airy, Jeremy?" "Ah, and with a fine view of the graves," growled Jeremy, leading the way out. In the street stood a chaise and four, surrounded by a pushing, jostling throng of men, women, and children, who, catching sight of me between the Bow Street runners, forgot to push and jostle, and stared at me with every eye and tooth they possessed, until I was hidden in the chaise. "Right away," growled Jeremy, shutting the door with a bang. "Whoa!" roared a voice, and a great, shaggy, golden head was thrust in at the window, and a hand reached down and grasped mine. "A pipe and baccy, Peter, from me, a flask o' rum, Simon's best from Simon, and chicken sangwidges from my Prue," this as he passed in each article through the window. "And I were to say, Peter, as we're all wi' you, ever and ever, and I were likewise to tell 'ee as 'ow Prue'll pray for 'ee oftener 'n before, and Ecod!" he broke off, the tears running down his face. "There were a lot more, but I forgot it all. Only, Peter, me and Simon be goin' to get a lawyer chap for 'ee, and ah, man, Peter, say the word, and I'll have 'ee out of this in a twinkling, and we'll run for it." But even as I shook my head, the post-boy's whip cracked, and the horses plunged forward. "Good bye, George!" I cried. "Good bye, dear fellow!" And the last I saw of him was as he stood, rubbing his tears away with one fist, and shaking the other after the chaise. Chapter 45, which concerns itself, among other matters, with the boots of the saturnine Jeremy. "A bottle of rum," said the man Bob, and, taking it up, very abstracted of eye, he removed the cork, sniffed at it, tasted it, took a gulp, and handed it over to his companion, who also looked at it, sniffed it, and tasted it. "And what do you make of that, Jeremy?" "Tasted better 'fore now," growled Jeremy, and immediately took another pull. "Sandwiches, too," pursued the man Bob, in a ruminating tone, "and I always was partial to chicken," and forthwith, opening the dainty parcel, he helped himself and his companion also. "What do you make of them, Jeremy?" he inquired, munching. "I've eaten wuss," rumbled Jeremy, also munching. "Young cove, they does you credit," said the man Bob, nodding to me with great urbanity. "Great credit. There ain't many misfortunates can perjuice such sandwiches as them, though, to be sure, they eats uncommon quick o' heart in there, Jeremy." But indeed the sandwiches were already only a memory, wherefore his brow grew black, and he glared at the still munching Jeremy, who met his looks with his usual impenetrable gloom. "A pipe and bacca," mused the man Bob, after we'd ridden some while in silence, and with the same serene unconsciousness of manner he took the pipe, filled it, lighted it, and puffed, with an air of dreamy content. "Jeremy's a goodish sort," he began, with a complacent flourish of the pipe, "a goodish sort, but cross-grained. Lord, young cove, 'is cross-grainedness is ekalled only by 'is perwerseness, and 'cause why? 'Cause 'e don't smoke. Go easy with the rum, Jeremy. There's nothin' like a pipe o' bacca to soothe such things away. I got my eye on ye, Jeremy. No, there's nothin' like a pipe o' bacca. Look at me, I were the perwersest infant that ever was, till I took to smokin', and to day, whatever I am, I ain't perwerse, nor yet cross-grained, and many a misfortunate cove, as is now no more, has wept over me at partin'." "They generally always do," growled Jeremy, uncorking the rum bottle with his teeth. "No, Jerry, no," returned the other, blowing out a cloud of smoke. "Misfortunates ain't all the same. Arter you with that bottle. You have criers, and laughers, and praters, and silent ones, and the silent coves is the dangerousest. Arter you with the bottle, Jeremy. Now you, my covey," he went on, tapping my hand gently with his pipe stem, "you ain't exactly talkative. In fact, not wishin' no offence, I might say as you was inclined to be one o' the silent ones. Not as 'olds that against you, far from it, only you reminds me of a young cove as 'ad the misfortune to get hisself took for forgery, and who, arter me a talkin' and a chattin' to him in my pleasant way, went and managed to commit suicide under my very nose, which were hardly nice or even respectable considerin'. Arter you with the bottle, Jeremy." Jeremy growled, held up the bottle to the failing light of evening, measured its contents with his thumb, and extended it unwillingly toward his comrade's ready hand. But it never got there, for at that instant the chaise lurched violently, there was a cry, a splintering of glass, a crash, and I was lying, half stunned, in a ditch, listening to the chorus of oaths and cries that rose from the cloud of dust where the frightened horses reared and plunged. How long I remained thus I cannot say, but all at once I found myself upon my feet, running down the road, for hazy though my mind yet was, I could think only of escape, of liberty and freedom at any price, at any cost. So I ran on down the road, somewhat unsteadily as yet, because my fall had been a heavy one, and my brain still reeled. I heard a shot behind me, the sharp crack of a pistol, and a bullet sang over my head. And then I knew they were after me, for I could hear the patter of their feet upon the hard road. Now, as I ran, my brain cleared, but this only served me to appreciate the difficulty of eluding men so seasoned and hardy as my pursuers. Moreover, the handcuffs galled my wrists, and the short connecting chain hampered my movements considerably, and I saw that upon this straight level I must soon be run down, or shot from behind. Glancing back, I beheld them some 100 yards or so away, elbows in, heads up, running with that long, free stride that speaks of endurance. I increased the pace, the ground flew beneath me, but when I glanced again, though the man Bob had dropped back, the saturnine Jeremy ran on, no nearer, but no farther than before. Now, as I went, I presently espied that for which I had looked, a gate set in the midst of the hedge, but it was closed, and never did a gate, before or since, appear quite so high and insurmountable. But with the desperation of despair, I turned and ran at it, and sprang, swinging my arms above my head as I did so. My foot grazed the top bar, down I came, slipped, stumbled, regained my balance, and ran on over the springy turf. I heard a crash behind me, an oath, a second pistol barked, and immediately it seemed that a hot iron seared my forearm, and, glancing down, I saw the skin cut and bleeding, but, finding it no worse, breathed a sigh of thankfulness, and ran on. By that leap I had probably gained some 20 yards. I would nurse my strength, therefore. If I could once gain the woods! How far off were they? Half a mile? A mile? Well, I could run that easily, thanks to my hardy life. Stay! What was that sound behind me? The fall of flying feet, or the throbbing of my own heart? I turned my head. The man Jeremy was within 12 yards of me. Lean and spare, his head thrust forward, he ran with the long, easy stride of a greyhound. So it was to be a question of endurance? Well, I had caught my second wind by now. I set my teeth, and, clenching my fists, lengthened my stride. And now, indeed, the real struggle began. My pursuer had long ago abandoned his coat, but his boots were heavier and clumsier than those I wore. But then, again, my confining shackles seemed to contract my chest, and the handcuffs galled my wrists cruelly. On I went, scattering flocks of scampering sheep, past meditative cows who started up, puffing out snorts of perfume, scrambling through hedges, over gate and stile and ditch, with eyes upon the distant woods full of the purple gloom of evening, and in my ears the muffled thud, 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 thud of the pursuit, sometimes seeming much nearer, sometimes much farther off, but always the same rhythmic, remorseless thud, 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 thud. On and ever on, climbing steep uplands, plunging down precipitous slopes, past brawling brooks and silent pools, all red and gold with sunset, past oak and ash and thorn, on, with ever those thudding footfalls close behind. And as we ran, it seemed to me that our feet beat out a kind of cadence, his heavy shoes and my lighter ones, thud, thud, pad, pad, thud, thud, pad, pad, until they would suddenly become confused and mingled with each other. One moment it seemed I almost loved the fellow, the next I bitterly hated him. Whether I had gained or not I could not tell. To look back was to lose ground. The woods were close now, so close that I fancied I heard the voice of their myriad leaves calling to me, encouraging me. But my breath was panting thick and short, my stride was less sure, my wrists were raw and bleeding, and the ceaseless jingle of my chain maddened me. Thud, thud, untiring, persistent, thud, thud. The pulse at my temples throbbed in time with it, my breath panted to it, and surely it was nearer, more distinct. Yes, he had gained on me in the last half mile, but how much? I cast a look over my shoulder. It was but a glance, yet I saw that he had lessened the distance between us by half. His face shone with sweat, his mouth was a line, his nostrils broad and expanded, his eyes staring and shot with blood, but he ran on with the same long, easy stride that was slowly but surely wearing me down. We were descending a long grassy slope, and I stumbled more than once, and rolled in my course, but on came those remorseless footfalls, thud, 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 strong and sure as ever. He was nearing me fast, he was close upon me, closer, within reach of me. I could hear his whistling breaths, and then all at once I was down on hands and knees. He tried to avoid me, failed, and shooting high over me, thudded down upon the grass. For a moment he lay still, then, with a groan, he rolled over and propped himself on his arm, thrust a hand into his bosom, but I hurled myself upon him, and, after a brief struggle, twisted the pistol from his grasp, whereupon he groaned again. "Hurt?" I panted. "Arm broke, I think," he growled, and forthwith burst out in a torrent of curses. "Does it hurt so much?" I panted. "Ah, but it ain't that," he panted back. "It's me a-letting of you work off a mouldy old trick on me like that." "It was my only chance," said I, sitting down beside him to regain my wind. "To think," he growled, "o' me bein' took in by a " "But you're a great runner," said I. "A great fool, you mean, to be took in by a You have a long walk back, and your arm will be painful." "And serve me right for bein' took in by " "If you will lend me your neckerchief, I think I can make your arm more comfortable," said I. He ceased cursing to stare at me, slowly and awkwardly unwound the article in question, and passed it to me. Thereupon, having located the fracture, I contrived a rough splint with a piece of wood lying near, which done, he thanked me in a burst of profanity, and rose. "I've seen worse coves nor you," said he, "and one good turn desarvin' another. Lie snug all day, and travel by night. Keep to the by roads. This ain't no common case. There'll be 1,000 pounds on your head before the week's out, so look spry, my cove." Saying which, he nodded, turned upon his heel, and strode away, cursing to himself. Now presently, as I went, I heard the merry ring and clink of hammer and anvil, and, guided by the sound, came to a tumble-down smithy, where was a man busily at work, with a shock-headed boy at the bellows. At sight of me, the smith set down his hammer, and stared open-mouthed, as did also the shock-headed boy. "How long would it take you to file off these shackles?" I inquired, holding out my hands. "To file 'em off?" "Yes." "Why, that depends." "Then do it as soon as you can." Upon this the man turned his back to me, and began rummaging among his tools, with his head very near that of the shock-headed boy, until, having found a file suitable to the purpose, he set to work on my handcuffs. But he progressed so slowly, for one reason and another, that I began to grow impatient. Moreover, noticing that the shock-headed boy had disappeared, I bade him desist. "A cold chisel and hammer will be quickest," said I. "Come, cut me off this chain. Here, close up to the rivets." And when he had done this, I took his file, thrusting it beneath my coat, set off, running my hardest, leaving him to stare after me, with his eyes and mouth wider than ever. The sun was gone down when I reached the woods, and here, in the kind shadows, I stayed a while to rest, and rid myself of handcuffs. But when I felt for the file to do so, it was gone. End of which concerns itself, among other matters, with the boots of the saturnine Jeremy.